Just going to bring the meeting to start. Thank you very much indeed. And those of you who are committee members online, please make sure you're on the camera as well, which would be very helpful. And welcome to the meeting. We're meeting today, the 15th of July, for performance and overview. And those who may be watching now from outside the council or at some point in the future, you're very welcome indeed. And hopefully you find today's agenda just as important and interesting as we in the committee have found it. We're covering some really important aspects, from the revenue and capital for the outcome for last year to the forward view of the financial strategy, and then we'll be looking at enabling strategies, including procurement and self-assessment for 24-25. And those of you who are eagle-eyed will notice that I've approached those in a slightly different order to the printed council agenda, performance overview agenda, and thank you for allowing that, and also to the officers and the cabinet members involved. Thank you, Councillor Callard. I know you've been able to bring yourself forward to the early part of the meeting. That's appreciated. At the point that we either reach 11:15 or have concluded revenue and capital and financial medium term, I'm going to be leaving the meeting, and Councillor Buckler, as Deputy, will be taking over the chairing of the meeting at that point. And thank you, Councillor Buckler, for standing in for that. So we're going to start the meeting proper with any apologies for absence. Robert, have we received any?
No one today, Chair. We have a full complement.
Thank you. And declarations of interest, are there any? I see none. We'll move on to item 3, public open forum. Have we had any representations, Robert?
No one for today, Chair.
Thank you. So we'll move straight on into the item number 6 on the agenda, revenue and capital monitoring, the outturn for last year, 24-25. We're pleased to see the officers who oversee the finances of the council with us here, Peter Davis and Jonathan Davis, and great to see you here. Thank you for being here, and Councillor Callard as cabinet member. So I'll open it to Peter and to Jonathan or Ben, sorry, Councillor Callard, if you wanted to introduce this report, and then we'll take questions on it. So who would like to speak first?
I'll come in if it's okay, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Nice to see everyone at the committee this morning. Apologies I can't be there in person. The 2024-2025 financial year has seen the continuation of a number of financial headwinds which are impacting upon the council's service operating environment. The wider socio-economic landscape and cost of living challenges continue to have an impact on our communities, with a consequential increase in demand for council services and an impact upon income generating services. This particularly impacts the service areas of children's social care, adult social care, homelessness, and children's additional learning needs. Additionally, wider public sector challenges continue to impact upon council services, notably within health, where efforts to improve patient pathways impact upon the level and complexity of demand for social care. The first 2 financial updates received by Cabinet in October last year and December last year indicated significant pressure on the council's budget of between £3 million and £4 million. Cabinet subsequently endorsed mitigating action to develop a structured approach to tackling the forecast deficit through a range of budget recovery measures. These included a targeted vacancy freeze, maximising the use of grants and income to support core expenditure, bearing down on all non-essential spend, and identifying eligible capital-related costs that could be met from capital funding. In February 2025, the Cabinet received a 3rd update for the year, outlining a reduced forecast deficit of £1.593 million. This was reflective of favourable movements within the majority of service budget areas, where successful budget recovery action and additional grant income had been notified. At outturn, the Council had successfully mitigated the overall cost pressures through these ongoing targeted actions and through additional unbudgeted grants and contributions This has culminated in a gross expenditure budget surplus of £1.239 million prior to transfers to reserves, representing a 0.6% positive variance against the approved budget. The final budget outturn position is a significant improvement of £2.83 million since the previous forecast at Financial Update 3, where a budget deficit of £1,593,000 was anticipated. The majority of directorates have experienced improvements in positions, which is due to 5 main factors. Firstly, additional grant funding being secured, or services maximising core revenue costs being met from both revenue and capital grant funding. Secondly, staff vacancies continuing to be held as part of budget recovery action. Thirdly, increased external income from rents, fees and memberships. Fourthly, identifying additional costs eligible to be met from capitalisation directive to maximise its use. And finally, net borrowing costs remain lower than expected as cash balances remained higher for longer than expected and longer-term loans were secured at competitive rates. Whilst the final revenue outturn shows a marked improvement, it's important to recognise that over £3 million of this is due to one-off unbudgeted grant funding received from the Welsh Government during the year. This funding has temporarily alleviated service pressures, many of which persist and will continue to pose challenges throughout the current financial year. Thank you, Chair, and I look forward to the questions of the committee.
Thank you, Councillor Callard. I don't know whether Peter or Jonathan, you wanted to add anything more before we open it to questions. You're happy with that? Okay, so we'll open the report to questions from members of the committee. So who would like to go first? I don't see hands going up. Oh, I see one. Councillor Buckler.
Thank you, Chair. As you state, Councillor Callard, there's a sort of persistent overspend in social care and housing, and you cite cost of living crisis as having a sort of intrinsic effect on that. But it is, it's persistent, this overspend, and it's linked with housing and homelessness costs, which do present a sort of long-term structural risk. So how are we going to mitigate this? And, it is an ever-growing problem, which is, seriously flagged up in the report. There's a significant capital slippage being reported. While 1.3 million has been reallocated as contingency, consistent delays in project delivery include systematic issues in planning and execution. So, what measures are we using to mitigate this, which is obviously, has a potential to escalate? And the reliance on one-off grants. You've mentioned that we've secured grants, but we have a heavy reliance on grants. So if you could sort of explain how you're going to mitigate that sort of risk, really.
Thank you, Councillor Buckler. Councillor Callard.
Thank you for the questions, Councillor Buckler. Your first question about social care, it's really very valid. I think it continues to be a very challenging environment. We obviously are, at the minute in a process, a longer piece of work about, reablement, trying to, work with people who we think are, I suppose, at risk of needing to receive social care, in order that we can help manage that pathway in such a way that it improves their quality of life, but it also reduces the burden on the local authority. That work's continuing, but I agree with you that there is this trend of overspending within, specifically that directorate area, and I think that does speak to the increased numbers coming in to use the services, and on top of that, the increased complexity of the people coming to use that service, and on top of that, I think a little bit less so now, but historically, the high inflation that has also driven up the cost of delivering those services, had the other two The other two conditions remain stable. So it is a challenging environment. I think where we've looked over the past few years to try and bring savings through that directorate, through this programme of change, we've seen that we haven't been able to deliver 100% of the savings which we've forecast, and which we've targeted. I think, within this challenging directorate, I don't think that's completely unexpected, but it does speak to some of the overspends that we've seen within that directorate. It's something that we're going to keep working on. And I agree with you that it is a challenging area. These areas where we have a statutory responsibility. If someone knocks on our door, we answer the door, and so we are. It can feel sometimes like we are a little bit of a passenger to events in terms of the, how events in the outside world affect us in terms of that demand picture. But it is something we're working on. To come on to your second point about capital slippage, if it's okay, Councillor Buckler, I'll bring in Jonathan Davis to support with this question. He's got much broader knowledge than I have in this area.
Thank you, Councillor Card. Jonathan.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. Jonathan Davis, Head of Finance. I think, Councillor Buckler, it's a valid point you raise. I think we do have this annual cycle of quite large amounts of capital slippage. I think specifically this year, a lot of this has been very much due to grant-related issues, so late notification of capital grants, whether that's specific to projects or more generally in terms of grants from Welsh Government that can be used across the programme. But also outside of that, there are some planning issues that we continue to tackle. It doesn't take much in terms of disruption to push some of these works forward over the end of a financial year. But we have to be aware that capital schemes by their very nature are multi-year. When we set budgets right at the start, even before a financial year, we use the best information we have. Things change and things flex, especially in a capital programme which is quite varied. But I think there are things we can do to better plan and profile some of our budgets. But I think the main impact of this is on capital financing, and we manage that as we get better information that comes through during the year. So I think it's a valid question. We continue to work with those capital budget holders that've got large amounts of slippage year on year. But the other thing to just be cognizant of is many of these works will be delivered by external contractors and bodies, and sometimes we're at the reliant, I guess, on them and the ability for them to deliver on time. So many different factors that are in play on this, but ultimately we've identified there's little risk to these budgets carrying forward, and we're picking up with budget holders now early in the financial year to maintain pace and progress on the capital programme. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Buckler, were you content with those responses?
There was one more question, wasn't there, Councillor Buckler, about grant?
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Councillor Callard.
If it's okay, Chair, I'll quickly come in on that. I think you're right to identify grant funding as it represents a significant funding stream for the local authority and goes some way to providing significant support to a lot of our services. It's sometimes an area of frustration as well, I would say, because some of the, as we heard in the introduction, the timing of some of these grants can make planning more difficult for the local authority. As I mentioned earlier, we did see significant grant funding come in at the end of this year, which did mitigate some of the overspends within the different service sectors. We're very grateful that late grant funding came in. It's helped to support our services, and it's one of the reasons, along with the discipline that we've seen across our services, that we've managed to post a small surplus. But I think, from my role in the local authority, what I would always say to the people issuing the grants is that the more notice that we can have of the grants, the more certainty we can have about it, the better we're able to plan. And I think when we can plan a little bit better, we can use that money in the most effective way possible, so it can support our services throughout the year. So it is an area which, I'm conscious of. It's an area which carries some uncertainty, and that uncertainty, I would say it means that in some cases we end up being less effective than we might otherwise wish to be. But it's, I think it's a topic of conversation across most local authorities about the nature of grant funding, what grant funding could be moved into, core revenue funding from Welsh Government. And I think that's going to be a conversation that we continue to have.
Councillor Buckler?
Really, what's sort of coming out from, your answers to my questions is really that there needs to be a better connection between Welsh Government and the grant system awarding to councils, because it obviously has a material effect. We'd like to sort of see that highlighted really from us, I think. Thank you.
Peter Davis, I think you wanted to come in.
Thank you, Chair. Peter Davis, Deputy Chief Executive, Statutory Director for Resources. So I think just to supplement Councillor Callard's input and directly speaking to Councillor Buckler's point there, I think it's just worth highlighting in most instances, I say most, in most instances, there is very constructive upfront and advanced dialogue with Welsh Government, particularly when they are looking to design grant changes. Against a backdrop, and let's just recognise, I think John could probably just confirm by way of a nod really, but I think the specific grant funding block alongside the settlement has been broadly consistent. It's generally just modestly increased, I think, in recent years. So we're afforded, I guess, a level of comfort around that. We wait to see, I guess, as we move into the autumn in terms of whether Welsh Government will look to introduce, I guess, a one-year budget, or whether they will follow through on any commitments around a comprehensive spending review of their own. I guess that's still up in the air, I think, John. And just in terms of that sort of front-footed dialogue, it's making sure that our interests are protected in that regard. It's particularly the case where we have core costs being underwritten and met by that grant, and where that grant is recurrent. That is where primarily the issue occurs, separate to perhaps one-off grants that are maybe designed to deliver specific one-off schemes and projects. So it's just to highlight that dialogue is ongoing. It's ongoing with and through the WLGA. It happens at leaders level, it happens at treasurers level. I know that, for example, in a social care setting, given the very first question, Jane, who's with us here in the chamber today as statutory director, she will equally be engaged through Association of Directors of Social Services and with Welsh Government as well. So it is at all times and to the point, making sure that risks are being identified and properly discussed through with Welsh Government, particularly when they're looking to either alter the funding pot, the quantum, or in fact the distribution of the grant.
Great, thank you. It's the line of questions from Councillor Buckler and the discussion that we've just been having around social care. It really begs the question where we're seeing an overspend of 2.4 million in children's services and of 1.4 million in adults social care. this is almost a perennial issue, and I suppose it begs the question: are we simply structurally underrepresenting the real cost of social care, and expecting savings to be generated that really cannot be generated, and therefore, we come to this point pretty well every year that savings have not been generated to the level expected, and those services are overspending. Are we simply underrepresenting the real cost of it in our budget, and in that extent doing that unrealistically? I just wonder your views.
If it's okay, I'll just come back in on that. I was having a separate discussion with Cabinet actually in the last 2 weeks on this point. So I think it's just worthwhile just sort of highlighting, something from within the report. I know it's given only sort of brief reference, but I guess in terms of some of those early indications with regards to the current year position. So if we just take a reflection, sort of a post-COVID reflection, and in terms of where we felt the bite of that with the cost of living crisis overlaying it, to Councillor Callard's earlier points in terms of levels of complexity and demand. Clearly, we have faced some very challenging budget rounds in that regard, and particularly in social care. And we've looked to, or certainly Jane and the team have looked to stand up some ambitious levels of reform. I think we've learned some lessons from that in terms of trying to probably push the bar too high too quick. And I think we've suffered in that regard in dealing with sort of overspends, therefore, in the subsequent in-year positions. I think that's been evident as by way of some of the budget recovery action that we've had to take. I think that has certainly lessened, I think, to a degree in the last financial year. But my point of reference to the early forecast indications is that just if you take a line back to this point of the year, over the last 2-3 years, we were carrying quite a heavy level of forecast early overspend in social care. That is not evident going into this year. So I think it's important to recognise the recognition, I think, of the progress that is being made on the sort of reform that Jane can talk to much better than I can in social care. So it's just recognising that, and actually the discipline that we've introduced within the budget process to ensure that we've, in the best way possible, captured levels of associated risk and budget pressure into the budget. So it's just simply not manifesting by an increased large pressure having to be managed in year. I'm not decrying the very fact that this is a very significant challenge is facing social care, is equally facing the NHS. Everybody who reads the papers, social media understands that. You're always slightly catching your tail with this issue. And I guess as per the medium-term financial strategy, it's right that we take the rule of thumb of best estimate and assessment of risk in either hardwiring into our base budget, or I guess, John, making sure that we've got some level of modest reserve provision alongside to cater for pressures as they arise.
Yes, thank you. And my question very much was not to so much challenge those services directly, but to challenge the authority as to whether or not we're understating the real cost and over-expecting savings. So it's actually encouraging, Peter, to hear that presumably the first 2 or 3 months of the year, they're not looking at continuing that trend. So we'll watch that closely as we move forward. That sounds like it has some encouragement in it. I'm moving on to Councillor Newell. You have your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, colleagues. Apologies if I'm stealing Councillor Pavia's question. I don't think I am, but I missed the first 2 minutes. My sound wasn't working. Question, national insurance and reducing debt recovery. We've still got some uncertainty about how much funding we're going to get, and how is the impact of that increased national insurance bill affecting our budget so far? I know you can't give an exact answer, but just initial thoughts about where we are and what have we got in place to mitigate any shortfalls we might have with that goes into our budget by having to pay all this extra national insurance. But the other thing worries me is this the debt recovery and the amount of arrears and council tax that's outstanding. We don't seem to see any movement on that, and I'm sure that would help our budget. So the negative impact of national insurance, how does that affect us and how are we doing? And what can we do to get more of our council tax monies in when most of us are all paying our council tax on time? You know, what can we do to get everyone else's in on time? And thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Newell. And presumably on the national insurance, you're including schools as well. You know, it's the overall impact on budgets, I guess you're really getting at. And who wants to pick those issues up?
If it's okay, Chair, I'll come in first, and then potentially Peter Davison behind me.
Please do.
Thank you. Question about national insurance is a very good one. Yes, it has been a cost pressure for us. There was some additional funding to support the increased cost of national insurance, but it didn't cover our total national insurance liability. You're right to highlight there's still some uncertainty around funding for that area, but in last year's budget we put in place a contingency fund in order to mitigate against that risk. So if the risk crystallizes, then we have cover, within our budget set for this year in order to mitigate against it. On your second question around council tax arrears, I think I'll bring in Peter on that one, but I would just say in passing that there are a lot of reasons that we find people in council tax arrears, and they're not all because people are just refusing to pay their council tax. In some cases, we have arrears from people who may have passed away, and maybe going through probate. There are a variety of reasons. So then, I suppose just to highlight the point that they're not all people who are sat on council tax bills and refusing to pay them. But Peter, would you or John could you come in and provide a little bit of information around that?
Thank you, Councillor Callard. And Jonathan.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Ben. You've covered the main issues there well. I think we have seen a trend, probably post-pandemic initially, of council tax arrears increasing, but not just council tax, social care debt as well has been an area of focus for us. I think it's important to note that this isn't unique to Monmouthshire. It's an issue that's affecting local authorities across the UK. I think as we've seen year-on-year increases in council tax, especially tackling those difficulties over the recent years, it has put a strain on household budgets when you take them in the round of everything else that the cost of living crisis has impacted on. What we have got in place, importantly, is the council tax reduction scheme, and that does aid in helping those most in need of help with their council tax payments. And we actively encourage all of those who are eligible and do good work through the communities in communicating that to those that are eligible. I think what we have got is an opportunity now to focus, especially in the early part of this financial year, on our recovery and the steps that we can take in dealing with some of those outstanding arrears. So the other thing just to mention is that we have seen an increase as well in discounts and exemptions being applied to council tax accounts. We are moving more towards a Welsh average on those from a low position. So I think that probably just speaks to the authority communicating well with residents the opportunities they have to apply for council tax reduction, discounts and exemptions that they are fully entitled to. So, there's many varying factors behind this, as you've pointed out, Councillor Callard, but I know our shared service does some incredible work in both supporting council taxpayers but also ensuring that our recovery measures are robust where they need to be.
Thank you, Jonathan. Councillor Newell, were you content with those answers?
Yeah, thank you to Councillor Callard and the officer there for the answer. Yeah, it was, and of course I understand completely there are numerous reasons why people are not able to pay their council tax. I just wonder now, as an authority, we can find a way to go and get the money that is due to us, that's legitimately due to us, excusing all the people that have good reasons, like I say, bereavement, illness, unemployment. That's a different thing. But all those who should be paying, yeah, we maybe need to have a look at how we can get more of that money in. But no, I appreciate the answers. I know it's a very, very difficult subject, and it's not just unique to Monmouthshire. So no, I'm grateful to both the gentlemen for the answers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Newell. And I think, Peter, you'd like to come in again on that.
Yeah, I think it's just on 2 points, really. First off, just to recognise in terms of where long-term sort of collection rate sits here. I think myself and John, we had an update, didn't we, from Deb Smith from the shared service earlier in the week. And we got a 99% collection rate, and I think certainly because it'll take sometimes a few years in order to actually get introduce the full long-term collection rate, because obviously people who are having difficulty paying, will get into payment plans with them in order to allow payment to be made over a more reasonable period. But we're pushing up over the 90%. I think from memory, 21, 22, 22, 23 even was topping over 99%. So notwithstanding, I guess, some of the current challenges, Welsh Government have got sort of an eye on this themselves. I know they're working through the Revenues Group and with Welsh Treasurers as well in terms of looking potentially at advice guidance and some of the changes in legislation that may assist, I guess, the right type of enforcement action. But equally, I think to John's very valid inputs, making sure that we're having very full regard for those who are obviously in challenging circumstances and with their ability to pay. So, I know that, again, Deb Smith and the shared services, together with inputs from us collectively, we've responded to a number of consultations already. I think there's another one that's either out or due to go out now shortly.
Thank you, Peter. I think we have been, as a council, at the high end of collection rates across Wales. I'm not sure we're still the highest, but over the last few years, I think we've certainly been right up there. And it's important that this question is asked because we obviously can't be complacent about this, and really important we understand it. The issue of probate, however, doesn't seem to me to be one that should relate directly to this, because there is always probate, there are always some overhangs that will be resolved in due course. So unless there's a particular rise in probate issues, they would normally flow in 1 year after the next and wash through. So I'm not sure probate should be seen as particularly influencing this. Would that be a reasonable way of looking at it? And it's more about the ability to pay or the avoidance of payment. Jonathan.
Thank you, Chair. I think simply it was probably the issues that we've seen perhaps with some of the delays in probate over recent years that have impacted. It just means that it takes longer to collect those payments than would otherwise have been in the case previously, so that has an impact on our in-year collection rates. So I think, Councillor Carr, that's probably where you were going on that one. Thank you, Chair. That's
a great point. I think they've increased from 3 to 6 months to more like 12 to 24 months in many cases. Thank you for those clarifications. So, Councillor Newell, you're content with those points, yeah? Great. I'm going to move on to Councillor Pavia.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks, everyone, for presenting the papers this morning. This administration, as the sort of previous administration, were forced into a way, I suppose, reliant on staff vacancies to help manage the budget position. I don't know whether the Cabinet Member officers will be able to provide a breakdown of where these vacancies have been held the longest across the council, and how long some of these posts have remained fulfilled, and whether each vacancy is still considered essential to service delivery. I mean, if these roles are no longer required, why haven't they been formally abolished? And if so, if they are needed, consequently, what is being done to expedite recruitment and address these risks to service continuity? So I suppose, in a summary, Chair, to what extent is the current use of vacancy freezes sustainable? And what are the implications for service quality, staff morale, and organisational capacity going forward into 25-26? Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Pavia. It's such an important area. The report talks about targeted vacancy freeze, and your question is very much about the impact of that and how long it can continue without having a broader impact. So who wants to pick that up? Councillor Callard?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Pavia. It's a really great question. I suppose I don't have the data to hand as to the which directorates are carrying the highest number of vacancies. I imagine it would be finger in there, proportional to the size of those directorates. So as our largest directorate, I expect you would find more vacancies being held, for example, within health and social care, because it's like directly outside of education, it's our largest directorate by spend. I think what's worth talking about when we talk about holding these vacancies is what we've done is we've increased the threshold by which we would recruit to them by re-looking at that need. So where we do have need, of course, we're recruiting into vacancies. We've increased that threshold in order that we can drive budget recovery action and try and mitigate the impact against our services. It pushes it up, in effect, a layer within management in order to take those decisions, in order that we can have that double check to see how the requirement of those positions. I think it's a really valid point as to if we can do without them, then why don't we just formalise the current arrangement? And if we need them, why haven't we got people there? So we find ourselves kind of in this middle ground at the moment, whereby we're almost acknowledging that we need resource in these areas while not putting resource into these areas. It's why, I do think it's a very valid question. I would like to think that if our budget constraints ease, over the medium term, that we are able to re-recruit into these roles, in order to bolster those services which are carrying those vacancies. And so it's from my perspective, the view that these vacancies should not exist permanently. If the vacancies should exist permanently, then the structure should be changed so that the role no longer exists. But if it's our intention to re-recruit into those posts when conditions allow, in order to strengthen those services, then I think it's right that they're held vacant.
Thank you, Councillor Callard. Councillor Pavia, did you want to come back on that?
Yeah, just thank the Cabinet Member for his answer. I mean, I'd be interested in the data, Chair. So I don't know whether we can mark that as an action for this committee to secure that data from officers and share it with the committee after this session via email. I'm just interested where there are, because I know that there are pressures in frontline delivery in certain areas. That's I'm seeing that through my own caseload and trying to get things done within my ward and within the town of Chepstow. So I'd be interested to see where those areas are still where we are holding those vacancies and potentially the costs attached to each of those vacancy freezes. So if that could be an action, Chair, I'd appreciate that.
Thank you, Councillor Pavey, and I have no doubt that we will be able to get that information and share it around committee members and in the days ahead. So thank you for raising that and for flagging it up. Just a quick follow-up to that, Councillor Callard. The point you make, which is very understandable, about increasing the threshold, is that a threshold that is estimating greater impact on finances or a greater impact on services? How do you move up a threshold and still manage to deliver the services that are required?
Thank you for the question, Chair. I think it's probably one best directed at the directors within their services. Those are the people who will know best the requirements of their service. And obviously, it's a balance. What we'd like to do is to offer, I guess, that balance between minimal affecting, a minimal effect on frontline services, while also generating, a reasonable budget recovery action. So it's taking that balance. The best people to take that judgment are the people who are within those operational departments, who understand much better than I could ever do how those decisions are going to impact frontline services.
Thank you, Councillor Callard. I see Matthew Gatehouse, the Director, who is bursting to come in on this. Matthew.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. For the benefit of those watching at home, Matt Gatehouse, Chief Officer, People, Performance and Partnerships. And just to elaborate on Councillor Callard's answer, at the outset of this, we agreed a set of criteria at Strategic Leadership Team that all vacancies needed to be considered against by Directorate Management teams. And they included things like, would not filling this post pose a health and safety risk? Would it pose a risk to the well-being of named individuals, clients, service users, and a number of other criteria? So each Directorate Management team considers vacancies that arise and whether they need to be fulfilled, or whether those vacancies need to be fulfilled, whether they can be filled like for like, or whether something different could be done to get that work done in a more creative way. And a good example is probably work in social care, where actually a lot of work around sort of home care has been reprioritised and organised differently to meet the needs of clients with a lower number of staff. And the other element we have now, so each Director Management team looks at that, and then before advert, every single vacancy is signed off by either myself, Pip Green as Head of HR, Peter Davis as Deputy Chief Exec, or Paul Matthews. So there's that additional level of clearance. And it really, we think of it as good practice, because you shouldn't just assume you can fill a job like for like, but we do have criteria to make sure that we're not unduly placing harm or risk into communities.
Thank you, Matt. That's a very good answer, very clear. And Councillor Pavey, I think you said that you're content with that. We'll get the follow-up information broken down as you've requested it. And moving on to Councillor Garrett.
Great, thank you, Chair. Thanks a lot, everybody. Just a question about the passenger transport, the 555,000. It mentions about demand and contract handbacks. What does that relate to? Normal regular bus services, or does it relate to any like homeschool transport or things like that? And what can we do maybe to mitigate those costs? And secondly, it was to do with the school deficits. Again, where are we working with the schools and their management to try and look for savings, particularly supply teaching? Being a former teacher, I know that's a huge cost for schools. We ought to be trying to take the profit out of supply teaching as well as out of social care. So what are we doing with schools management to mitigate that? When I was a teacher, we used to regularly get teachers that were either partially retired or knew the school well to come in, and that would be better in terms of the teachers' pay, but also, takes out the cost of the commercial fees for getting supply in. So, yeah, and how can we also support teachers who maybe are out to get back into school, so we can mitigate those costs? Thanks.
So yes, thank you for the question, Councillor Garrett. And we have with us Deborah Howells, who's I think going to pick up that particular question immediately. So Deborah.
Good morning, members. I'm Deborah Hill-Howells. I'm the Interim Chief Officer for Infrastructure, and I can pick up the question that you had, Councillor Garrett, as regards passenger transport. The costs relate, actually, the increase in costs relate to, and the overspend relates to our home-to-school transport service rather than public buses. Our public buses are funded largely through grants, which are provided through Welsh Government. Home-to-school transport is funded by the local authority. We've seen a 25% uplift in costs over the last 3 years, which arise from increased number of learners that we are now transporting, and also the increase in costs from our operators. That is also accelerated by issues where we have tendered contracts, external contractors have then handed those back for a variety of reasons. It could be illness, it could be that they are now actually going to work for a different local authority, or indeed that they are now retiring. When we find ourselves in those positions, we are then having to retender very quickly to try and find alternative cover, because we need to make sure that we are continuing to provide that transport whilst we look to provide more sustainable alternatives, or we actually cover those contracts in-house through our own operating team. So we do continually review our routes, we continually review the passengers that we're transporting and the size of the vehicles to deal with any variations throughout the year. We also have new learners moving into the area, which frequently requires the provision of additional contracts to deal with the additional learners travelling. Hopefully that responds on that question, and I'll hand over to my colleague Nikki. I think we'll pick up the schools.
Welcome, Nikki. You're going to pick up on school deficits, yeah?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. I'm Nikki Wellington, Support Services Manager. So, yeah, just in terms of school deficits, so you'll be aware that when a school goes into a deficit, they are required to do a recovery plan. There are several schools you will know that have already got recovery plans, and those that have fallen into deficit for the first time at the end of the year, we're working with them currently to get the recovery plans in place. So in many cases, we're in the second year of the recovery plans, and we're seeing that schools are making recoveries against those and are coming back in line with those plans, which is pleasing. In terms of the support, so the support for the schools, obviously when they fall into a deficit, a team around will go and discuss that with the head teacher, so that will be members of finance and members of HR and school improvement in some cases where we need their advice. We will be able to work with the school to make suggestions. Obviously it's down to the governing body then to take those suggestions forward. They produce a recovery plan which then comes to the local authority for approval, and in several cases they have been in front of the Cabinet Member for Resources and the Cabinet Member for Education to have that approval granted for them. Thank you.
So, Nikki, what we're describing for anybody who might be looking at this is that the report talks about 15 of our schools that are in deficit, and the deficit has grown round numbers from about 1 million to just over 4 million during the year. So what you're indicating is that the recovery plans for every school that is in deficit are pushing towards an improved situation this year. Is that what we should be expecting?
What you'll see, because of the timing of staff changes, because obviously the staffing changes won't start until September, so we've only effectively got in year one 7 months of a saving. So what we will see, and we knew this through the recovery plans, that we knew it would get worse before it would get better. But we can see as we look across the timeline of those recovery plans that school balances are improving.
And so the September this year through to the end of March next year, we are likely, you're anticipating an improved situation, but not the full situation resolved.
Yeah, because until they've had that vacancy, they'll only get 7 months in the first year and then 12 months in the following year.
Absolutely, completely understand that, and that's what we're anticipating. Okay, thank you for those clarifications, and also Deborah for the clarification around what is in regard to home to school transport, but over £500,000 overspend. That's correct? Councillor Garrett, were you content with those responses?
Yeah, on the transport, yes. Just about supply teaching, is that still like a huge cost pressure, and are we able to try and draw in better value cover, especially cover that actually subject specific as well? If you've got, say, a teacher who's on maternity leave, for example, are we able to get in staff that we can use more effectively, more reasonably than going to, say, agencies
okay,
might charge a lot more and pay teachers a lot less, as I've experienced in the past.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Garrett. So, Nikki, did you want to pick that up?
Yeah, so there's been a recent audit around supply staff, and obviously I've shared that with schools. So what we are seeing is a high number of schools using agency staff. Welsh Government have a framework for agency staff, and we do encourage schools to use that. If they choose not to, then obviously they need to be going through our proper procurement rules. At the last head teachers meeting that we had, schools have actually asked us to look at alternative ways of providing supply staff, so maybe through a pool of supply staff that we employ. So obviously that's in the very early stages at the moment, but it is for the schools. The schools can choose their own method of covering the vacancy. If their vacancy, for example, is a maternity leave vacancy, and you are know that that's going to be for a relatively long period of time, we do encourage schools to employ rather than use agency, because you get the consistency then, and you're not getting somebody that may leave mid-contract.
Thank you, Nikki. Okay, I'm going to move on to Councillor Bond.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, everybody. Just a question further to Matt Gatehouse, please. Sorry, I had to pop out. I'm not totally well at the minute. So how do we decide, you might have said this, I'm sorry I missed it. How do we decide the need for a position and versus a vacancy? Have we undertaken as a council a process mapping exercise for all the delivery, all the services that we deliver? And have we reviewed that? And have we decided the resource level that's the right size organisation for those services? So have we done a mapping exercise for all the processes and obviously cut waste in the process? And are the results available, or can you share any of that, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bond. And I think Matt Gatehouse has probably answered the first one, but do you want to clarify that, Matt, and take on the other?
Yes, certainly. So, Councillor Bond, you may have missed a little bit of my early answer, so apologies to others. There might be a little bit of overlap. So, just to set out, we have a clear set of criteria that vacancies are evaluated against in a clearance process. And again, I'm sort of happy to share the detail in a bit more detail alongside the other information the committee have asked for in a follow-up email in terms of that process. In terms of process mapping across all services, no. I mean, as a local authority, we operate hundreds and hundreds of services. That's not something we do as a sort of central HR or organisational development team. But actually, as part of identified as part of each vacancy, a directorate management team is asked to consider other ways in which services can be provided. And there is regular work going on across the whole of the authority to look at, review, evaluate and change services based on sort of prioritisation agreed locally. And at that point, whether or not staffing model is optimal is considered, and we frequently go through restructures and changes at a service level to ensure that our workforce is right sized for the tasks which need to be done.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Matt. That's very helpful. I see no more hands on this issue and this report, so I'm going to refer you back to the recommendations that are at the top of the report and move this report. And I know that it will be considered by others as we move forward, including Cabinet. So thank you. We'll move on to the next report, which is the medium-term financial strategy update, which, rather than looking backwards, is now going to look ahead and has some very interesting aspects to it. So who would like to speak first? Councillor Callard?
Thank you, Chair. The Council reviews its budgetary position annually and produces a rolling 4-year plan known as the Medium-Term Financial Plan. This plan considers the financial context at both the local and national level, together with forecast available resources and budgetary pressures in arriving at a forward financial projection. This report represents the 6-monthly update of the Council's medium-term financial plan and outlines the context and framework for the budget for the financial year 26-27, together with a high-level indication of the financial outlook over the medium term. The updated medium-term financial plan projects a £13.6 million budget gap for 2026-2027, rising to a cumulative £38 million budget gap by 2029-2030. This reflects updated assumptions around pay inflation, non-pay inflation, superannuation rates, and service pressures. And just to provide a little bit of context around that, when we went into this year's budget round and the previous year's budget round, we faced a gap of over £20 million in those last two budget rounds. The Council's operated in a challenging financial environment since 2010, and it's delivered over £83 million in savings within that time, and also absorbed more than £31 million in cost pressures in the last 2 years alone. Despite these pressures, the Council has maintained a strong track record of financial resilience and effective resource management. The Council faced significant in-year pressures in 2024-2025, particularly in children's and adult social care, homelessness and additional learning needs. These were driven by the ongoing cost of living crisis, inflationary pressures, high interest rates and workforce challenges. Early forecasts projected a deficit of up to £4 million. However, as we've heard, through targeted recovery actions and additional unbudgeted grant funding, the Council achieved a £1.239 million surplus before transfers to reserves, and this outcome has helped to stabilise the Council's reserves and reduce future financial risk. The financial outlook for 2026-2027 remains highly uncertain. National and local factors, including economic conditions, policy changes, demographic shifts, and new responsibilities, are expected to influence the Council's operating environment. The UK Government's Comprehensive Spending Review was published in June, and there is an anticipated Welsh Government Spending Review, which should provide further clarity on future funding levels. The Council's usable revenue reserves have been drawn down over recent years, particularly during 2022, 2023 and 2023-2024. This followed temporary replenishment during the COVID-19 pandemic through substantial Welsh Government support. 2024-2025 saw a modest improvement in general reserves. However, this was offset by a £3.187 million increase in the school's reserve deficit, which we've just spoken about, bringing the cumulative schools position to a £4.1 million deficit. Schools receive funding through the individual schools budget, which totals £60.45 million in 2025-2026, which is around 27% of the Council's net budget. While the schools are responsible for managing their own budgets, the Council retains oversight of their financial performance. Reserve balances vary widely across schools, with some maintaining healthy surpluses and others facing significant deficits. The final position for the last financial year showed that £3.187 million increase in the overall schools deficit, with 15 of 35 schools operating within a deficit. This was lower than forecast due to late grant funding and cost-saving measures. Monmouthshire's council fund remains at 5% of the net revenue budget, a level considered prudent for managing short-term risks. Many reserves are earmarked for specific services or timing adjustments, leaving limited flexibility for strategic use. This has prompted a renewed focus on strengthening budget management and in-year financial discipline, alongside a revised reserves policy aimed at protecting and rebuilding reserve levels over the medium term. And I'd like to thank Jonathan Davis and the team within his department for bringing this report together. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Callard, and there's a lot in the report that is worthy of some close attention. Just so we're comparing like with like, your reference to what we were looking at last year of 20 million shortfall, that was actually for 2 years hence from last year. Last year we were looking at the budget shortfall for the next year, which is one we're now in, of 12.2 million. So comparing like with like, we're saying the shortfall has gone up for the following year from 12.2 to 13.6. And the medium-term cumulative shortfall, which was expressed this time a year ago, was at 34.7 million, and that is now 38 million. So just so we're sure we're comparing, apples and apples here. Those seem to be the relevant comparison numbers. That's correct, isn't it?
It might be worth John just taking a view on that as to whether or not we take the budget gap we took into the budget 25-26, or whether we take the numbers from the last medium-term financial plan update.
Well, what I'm really saying, I'm not really proposing we get into a lengthy debate about this issue, but what we were presented with at this time last year for the following year and for the medium term were the numbers I've just read out. And therefore, I'm simply saying that if we're going to compare numbers, we should surely be comparing like with like, and just really saying that I think that is highly appropriate, unless the numbers I've read out are incorrect. Jonathan,
Thank you, Chair. I think just briefly, absolutely right, Chair. I think that is the direct comparison. I think what this brings is a point-in-time assessment of that updated position. It makes a prudent assessment for all of the assumptions that go into that modelling. I fully expect every number within this report to change by the time this comes back in the autumn. It's the nature of a budget process. So this very much just represents what we expect to be dealing with through the budget process and provides the context for all members who read the report of what we're dealing with as we move into certainly next financial year, but also over the medium term. So in short, Chair, absolutely correct in terms of that comparison.
Thank you, Jonathan. And opening the report for questions and any questions you may have. While we're just waiting for hands to go up, could I just ask about the point being made at 3.16 in the report that we have the lowest reserve cover in Wales, and if it's possible just to get some clarification, because on the face of it that sounds concerning. Should we be concerned? Jonathan.
Happy to take that, Chair. So this was a reference to an Audit Wales report that was published probably around about 18 months, 2 years ago now, which identified that as a proportion of our total revenue budget, our reserves stood at the lowest end of that cover. The context is all important within that. Our reserve position is made up of both usable and unusable reserves. So Councillor Callard touched upon the fact that we have many reserves that are very specific to services. They're set up for shared and joint arrangements. Those reserves wouldn't necessarily be usable for us. So there's a lot of context within those numbers that are important to understand. But on the face of it, and as backed up by the Audit Wales report that is referenced in there, yes, we do have the lowest reserve cover. Just quickly, I think it's important just to recognise that local authorities will be on different journeys and timelines in terms of their reserve investment. So some authorities will be accumulating reserves and in the knowledge that that strategic investment will be needed in the future. Some may already have done that strategic investment, and that's why they will have lower reserves. So that all makes up the different profile of those reserve balances, Chair.
Yeah, and that may well be the case, but I'm just reading it out from the report in front of us, which at 3.16 says the council has the lowest reserve cover in Wales, which heightens its exposure to financial risk. I'm just reading out what the report says. So, clearly there's a level of concern when you read it, something like that. So I see Councillor Buckler, you have your hand up.
Thanks, Chair. It's really sort of linked to the low general reserves. I think it sort of seems key in a lot of our medium-term risk evaluation. So, while an overall strategy exists, do you think the Council has enough robust, sustainable plans to bridge the projected funding shortfall, bearing in mind reserves are inadequate and immediate savings seem to be lacking? And bearing in mind that the Monmouthshire has received below average funding historically, sort of 12 or 15 years, it's been lower. What can we do? How can we improve this situation? Because obviously it is it is of concern. Thank you. And probably, Jonathan, you're the person to answer this.
I'll give Ben the opportunity to come in first, Chair, if that's okay, but happy to come in as needed.
Thanks, John, and thanks, Councillor Buckler, for the question. I'd say, it's looking. That outlook, it's a concerning picture, but I suppose I would say that it's been a concerning picture for quite some time for local authorities with regard to the pressure that they've been under for a number of years. That pressure continues. We have so far been, as an authority in this administration and in the last administration, successful in mitigating those pressures. If you ask me, is MCC still going to be here and still going to be solvent in 2030? 2030, that's not a year. In 2030, I would say yes, it absolutely will be. We've seen, I've seen from my role that I think we've got robust controls in place, we've got robust systems, and we've also got, got the levers which a local authority has in order to try and bridge that gap. This report and that gap is based on a number of assumptions, as Jonathan Davis has already mentioned. If one thing's certain, it's that these numbers will change, and over that time we will see some of the risks which make up that £38 million crystallise, and we will see some of the others fall away. I'm sure the nature of that pressure may well change over the next 4 years as well. So I think this report does a good job in highlighting the hill that we need to climb. But also based on past experience, I think as an authority we are well placed, in order to climb it.
Thank you, Councillor Callard. And Jonathan, would you like to add anything to that?
Thank you, Chair. And thanks, Councillor Callard, for outlining those various steps. I think what's important to realise probably within the planning assumptions here is a figure of 7.5 million annually that we assume will come forward for demand pressures, inflation within services, and where services aren't able to manage fully with the budget that they've been allocated for the previous year. That is something that we're looking to mitigate through the Council's wider programme of change and transformation. But we have to be cognizant as well that there's already many things that are going on within services that are looking to mitigate and improve the positions. So we've heard a little bit this morning about the things in social care that are being carried out, looking to mitigate and bring down that cost base over the medium term. There's many other programs going on across services, whether that's homelessness and the move to differing types of housing arrangements, or as we've seen in children's services, a different strategy to managing some of the care needs using more in-house services than perhaps we have in the past. So using all of those programs that are either in place now or that we're looking to develop as we move now over the medium term, that is where we will gain most impact on that budget gap as we move forward. I think the assumptions we have around pay awards, around funding, around wider cost inflation, whilst they will change, I think we've been quite prudent in those assumptions within this report. And I think all signs, for anyone who follows the news and the press, are that funding is going to be pretty tight over the next few years still for the public sector, given the national context that we're dealing with. So this is very much a scene-setting report, and I think just gives us an idea of the challenges that we'll be facing now as we head into the budget round come the autumn.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. Does anyone have any questions regarding this report? I don't see any hands up. No? Okay. In that case, I'd like to move the report and take note of the recommendations. And after that, we'll take we'll take 5 minutes break, and then we'll come back just while we sort ourselves out for the next item. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We're going to restart performance and overview, and the first thing we're going to come to is item number 5, which is the enabling strategies, including procurement report, which Richard Jones will be introducing, and Councillor Carlard is going to do the introduction first. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The Council's Community and Corporate Plan sets a clear purpose for Monmouthshire to be a zero-carbon county, supporting well-being, health and dignity for everyone at every stage of life. This is supported by 6 well-being objectives. A set of enabling strategies was subsequently developed. The strategies ensure that all the Council's assets and resources are aligned behind its core purpose, as set out in the Council's performance framework, shown in Appendix 2 to the report. To ensure the efficient and effective delivery of the enabling arrangements, an assessment of the performance of each of the enabling strategies in the last year, 24-25, has been completed. The assessment has been undertaken alongside the Council's self-assessment process to ensure alignment between the enabling arrangements and the delivery of the Council's objectives. The assessment evaluates how the performance of the objectives set within each enabling strategy. It addresses how well are we achieving our agreed outcomes, using a range of information to assess progress and impact of this work so far. It sets out how do we know, which identifies the evidence that supports the assessment made. It also proposes areas for development that will ensure the continued successful implementation of the strategy. The assessment also provides an overall score of progress using the Council's self-assessment framework. This is set out in Appendix 1. The financial year, we've already heard in this committee, of 2024-2025 saw a continuation of numerous pressures that are resulting in challenges for many local authorities. Monmouthshire is seeing increasingly complex demand and cost pressures. The aim of the enabling strategies is to support the Council to deliver its community and corporate plan, which strives to address complex issues over the long term and focus on the well-being of current and future generations. The assessment of overall progress for each enabler recognises that most strategies are in their first year of delivery. The assessment, based on delivery of activity plan for the first year of their implementation, and the effects of some activity may not be clearly demonstrable over such short timescales. The Performance and Overview Scrutiny Committee has an important role in scrutinising the Council's performance. This report provides the committee with an assessment of performance with the enabling strategies that the committee can use alongside the Council's annual self-assessment of performance for 2024-2025, which is the agenda item following this one. The committee may also wish to use both reports to identify any further areas it may want to scrutinise the performance of in more detail as part of its forward work plan, or refer to other committees if it falls within their remit. And I'm pleased to be joined by Richard and Hannah today, who will be able to support me in answering any questions that you may have on this report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Callard. Do any other officers who are sort of co-authors of the report have anything to add before Richard and Hannah? No? Okay, Richard, if you've got any comments to make, please do so.
Thank you, Chair. I think Councillor Callard's covered the key points very well. Just to highlight that all the authors for each of the strategies who've provided the updates are with us today to answer any questions on their particular strategy.
Great, thank you very much, Richard. So do we have any questions for officers on this report? Very quiet. Could Councillor Bond please ask questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm a little bit confused. We're not doing both the self-assessment and the enabling at the moment. We're just doing the enabling, aren't we?
Yes, indeed.
Yes. Yeah, thank you. Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. Okay, so page 103. So resources for well-being. So 6 out of 10 of the staff suggested that the well-being provisions are okay. Is that 60% acceptable? I know you've done some work, and some work around sharing the benefits and encouraging people to stay, obviously, and seeing how good it is to work for MCC. Or is there something deeper? Is it around a more empathetic workplace? What's the root cause? Are we doing any more work rather than just repeating what was said in there? Was we're telling people how, what benefits there are. Is there an underlying culture issue? Is there anything else that should be looked into, please, and whether that is an issue, something that we could follow up? And there's another one, people have the skills needed to influence the solutions. That's only 64% as well. Is that a learning organisation? Are we conducting reviews? Are we having team reviews? Are we doing all the team building and everything that encourages people to stay and increases people's well-being because they feel they're being listened to, maybe? And is it being affected by the issues we've just been talking about, but vacancies and perhaps increased pressure of work on the people that remain? That's one, please. So it's around the well-being and maintaining the skills and well-being of our people. The second one is around page 104, the average difference in pay between males and females. It's could someone explain that, please? It's a little bit confusing because it says in pounds, but the previous was the mean was 1.02, now it's 0.85, and the median is 0.75, and now it's 0.49. Are they £0.49? If it's measured in pounds, it doesn't really make sense to me, and I'm sure it doesn't to other people reading that. Could you explain it, please? And page 113, affordable housing development of land, is a specific one, a counterpart. The comprehensive school, what's the delay been, please, and why is it being delayed? And what's the proposal for when it can be picked up, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bond. And who would like to? Matthew Gatehouse is going to be an officer responding to the first question.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for the questions, Councillor Bond. One of the reasons we know this is because for the first time in the last year, 2024-25, we held or put together a staff survey around the organisation, and we haven't done that for some time. That's given us an insight into colleagues' views on key topics and gives us a baseline. We know there are things in there that we should and want to be better at. One of those is the issue that Councillor Bond has highlighted. There were sort of 3 questions in terms of whether colleagues felt they had enough information in relation to financial well-being, emotional well-being, physical well-being. As you rightly highlighted, Councillor Bond, there is some information in the report on that, and I won't repeat that. But we have been holding a range of different sort of methods around the organisation to talk and engage with staff and understand some of these issues in more depth. And as an example of that as well, the leader is just very proactively looking to go out and has made that offer to different staff groups around the organisation to talk to them and build on the work that's been done as part of the people strategy. But sometimes there are little fairly sort of quick things we can do. We found actually that a lot of that well-being information we hold was scattered throughout a lot of places on our staff intranet site. So that's now all been brought back together into one place. And when we held the staff conferences recently, we filmed our marketplace, which is where we offer all the well-being stuff. So all of the stall holders, whether that be unions or healthcare schemes that colleagues can access, were there. They filmed their input, and we're pushing that out to staff in different ways to improve access to that. Next time we run the staff survey, I would hope to see better than that sort of 6 out of 10 that was referred to. But we'll have to see and ask the staff, because it's the view of our staff group that really matters in that. In terms of skills and the ability to contribute and make a difference, over the last year, members in this chamber will be aware, but not necessarily everyone watching at home. We launched a new e-learning platform called Thinky. When we did the staff survey, we found 82% of people said they felt they had the skills they needed to do their job. But we also know from that survey, as Councillor Bond has referred to, not everyone felt able to apply those skills to make a difference. And there's a piece of work underway at the moment that I know that sort of Peter Davis, our Deputy Chief Exec, will talk to members more about a future stage in terms of involving staff in work around sort of change programmes to make sure that we can harness their skills. And some of the things we've done as part of the Cardiff Capital Region, such as the Infuse programme, that takes cohorts of staff through a great development opportunity, also have evidence of some of the ways we're looking to involve staff in helping them have a hand in sort of developing the future shape of the organisation in line with the sort of the aspirations and objectives set by Council.
Thank you very much, Matthew. Jill, you'd like to come back?
Yeah, so that I just wanted to say thank you very much. Great answer. The thing is, when budgets are short, that's the first thing that goes is the team building exercises and whatever, because they don't have to be expensive. As you've just said, it's very much about getting together and resolving issues as a team and being heard. So thank you very much for that. So the other two questions, please. Thank you.
Yes, apologies. I forgot on the issue of the pay gap. Yes, apologies for that if it's not very clear. That refers to pounds and pence. So where, for example, it's 0.85, that's 85 pence. Where it's 1.02, that's £1 and 2 pence. And
per hour, please.
Sorry.
Per hour.
Yes, that's the difference in hourly rate. Apologies, I was just scouring page 104 there. And apologies, Councillor, I don't think I've accurately captured a note of the other point I missed.
The only other one was around the affordable housing development in Caldecott. Just an quick update, please, because obviously we're very short of housing. I just wonder what the delay was and what's the proposed time, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bond. Nicholas Keys is going to answer that question for you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Bond, for the question. Nick Keys, Acting Head of Landlord Services at the Council. For clarity for members, the question here is in relation to an area of land next to Caldecott Comprehensive School that was sold to Monmouthshire Housing Association sometime around 18 months ago. So I'll comment as far as I'm able to, Councillor Bond, based on the information I have. I'm aware that Monmouthshire Housing Association went out to tender to appoint a contractor to build the scheme. Unfortunately, they were unable to award at that point. They have since retendered, and I'm told have since appointed a contractor. The target date I know was around kind of the tail end of the summer, I believe, as they were intending to be on site. But I'm more than happy to take away from this meeting perhaps a kind of further update from MHA. Obviously, we no longer own the site, so it's very much in their gift to bring it forward. But the commitment to us is the desire to absolutely build that scheme as soon as possible. So those are the latest dates I have. Hope that's helpful. Thank you.
Councillor Bond, are you content with that answer? You're on mute, Councillor Bond.
Sorry. While Nick was answering, thank you, Nick, got that. I've reflected on the average difference in pay and what was said by Matt. Is that acceptable that it's still 0.85 pence an hour? Because that's quite a significant difference. So what are we doing to look at that, please? Or is that coming up in another meeting?
It would be useful and an interesting answer, hopefully, from Matthew on this. Thank you.
Yes, thanks. Over time, there was a couple of elements to this. One is the gender pay gap that we report within the organisation, and then separately there's a piece of work going on as part of our people strategy research and understand the implications and reasons sat behind that. So some of the reasons that the gender pay gap exists are fairly sort of historic and complex, and exist not just in Monmouthshire, but in similar organisations and throughout society, and they exist for historic and entrenched reasons, partly related to historically the career choices that people have made or been led towards at an earlier stage of life. And what we're looking at here are sort of widespread societal challenges. Our own activities as an employer, we have a job evaluation scheme. We pay everyone that does the same job the same rate of pay, and our pay scales are transparent. So unlike perhaps in some private organisations where job grades, bandings are not published, that's all open. But we do have work to do, as I think do all employers, to really make sure that people do not perceive or experience a glass ceiling as they move through their careers, that the broadest range of career opportunities is made to children, and in particular sort of girls at that young age, so they don't see that certain professional careers are the preserve of men, as I think may have been the case historically, so that we can bring through that sort of breadth of future talent in all industries, and that sort of historic bias and historic difference we've seen in that pay gap is eradicated. But I would stress that in terms of people doing the same jobs, absolutely, whether male or female, they receive the same salaries for that work.
I'm content, Councillor Bond.
Sorry, it doesn't make sense to me. If they receive the same salaries, then how come there's the difference? You're saying parity, job parity, is it? It's where you've got similar jobs rather than exactly the same job. Is that what you're saying, this 0.85 pence difference or median of 49 pence differences? Because if you're paying everybody equal, then you wouldn't have a difference. So it must be comparable jobs?
Yeah, so
in the same job.
It will tend to be, Councillor. Yes, it's not about the difference of pay in the same job. It will perhaps be because we have more men in jobs that are evaluated at a higher level. So, for example, we know, unfortunately, and I think we all wish this weren't the case, that care, for example, is one of the lowest paid professions in our society. And I know that colleagues in social care will struggle, that they can easily lose staff to things like supermarkets as employers. So while we pay competitively compared to others, care, which tends to be predominantly a predominantly female workforce, is one of the lower paid professions. Whereas an industry such as engineering, and I know this, my daughter's studying engineering at the moment, and her course still in 2025 is predominantly male. And yet that will be one of the higher paid professions that we employ into. So that work is to try and get more females into encouraging, considering careers in those higher paid professions. And it's the same, if you look nationwide at STEM subjects, science, technology, engineering, and maths, which the subjects that lead to those better paid jobs. So yeah, to be clear, Councillor Bond, a male and a female doing the same job in Monmouthshire, whether that's care, whether it's accountancy, whether it's engineering, will receive the same salary, but we tend to have more men in higher paid career type roles, which is where that differential comes in.
Thank you. Perhaps that can be explained in the report a bit better then. Thank you. I completely understand now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bond, and thank you, Matthew. It's a very important and interesting subject, so thank you for bringing it up, Councillor Bond. And now moving on to Councillor Pavier, if you'd like to ask your questions.
Yeah, thanks, and again, thanks for everyone for the report. Obviously, in evolving technological landscape today, digital transformation has become a really critical factor both for the success and sustainability of local council services, and particularly the data and digital and data strategy, the importance of enabling better operational efficiency within the council, integrating digital tools and platforms to better manage resource, data-driven decision making to improve service delivery. How we enable or improve service delivery in terms of citizen engagement and improve access to services. And then in relation to procurement and commissioning, and just sort of thinking how we streamline our procurement processes through digital solutions, how we leverage digital tools for better contract management, etc. These are really, really important issues for us moving forward. And it feels from, and I know when we've discussed issues around procurement before, we've said, our data maturity isn't where it needs to be to help us improve our decision making using evidence-based data. What I'm taking from the report in terms of the absence of maturity assessments from the digital and data strategy, we're still not quite where we need to be. So I suppose it'd be useful to get a steer about how we're going to move at pace to close that gap in terms of assessment and benchmark in terms of where we need to be. And just thinking about the previous item in terms of the medium-term financial plan, I suppose what assurances can the Cabinet Member and officers provide us that digital investment is going to be aligned with the need to change, in terms of change and reform service need, and to manage that need, and also to deliver improved value for money as well. So I hope that was clear. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Pavia. Who's going to take this subject up?
I'll take this one if you don't mind. I think Councillor...
Could you just introduce yourself, Sian? That'd be very helpful.
Sian Haywood, Head of Information Security and Technology for Monmouthshire. I think that you first off asked about the digital maturity and our assessment process on that. Several years ago we did a digital maturity assessment in our digital team, and that went across all service areas where we looked at things like their staff skills, whether they have information management processes in place, whether they scan the horizon for future digital innovation projects. And at that time, we thought that we might have done better, but actually our baseline at that time was lower than we were expecting. We improved on that over the years, and now it's opportune to re-look at that digital maturity assessment in the light of the collaboration that we are having with our SRS partners in Blaenau Gwent and Torfaen, where we are collaborating across the whole of that digital and data service. It's opportune for us now to do that digital maturity assessment across all of the local authorities, so we're doing it all at the same time. And from that digital maturity assessment, we can work out where people's training skills gaps are, where the service areas are not looking towards the future service provision and future service redesign in a digital methodology, so that we can introduce not just cash savings but also efficiency savings across the service areas in, for instance, automation, where people save on their time so that they can apply their time to more human skills, where they have to use human brains rather than digital tools to get the job done. And those efficiency savings are far they're as useful as the cashable savings, because we are actually applying the hours of work that they've got and the teams that they've got to different uses to get that over the line. I mean, particularly important in the digital maturity assessments is how people manage their information. And you can see early on in the report that we mentioned the introduction of SharePoint Online. That isn't the only information receptacle that we have across the authority. We also have in the region of 80 systems that people use on a day-to-day basis to put all of their information and data in there, and we need to make sure that those people are putting that information and data into those line of business systems so we can extract it and use that information, turn it into data insights as to how we can redesign our services or reassess our policy objectives. We're in the infancy of this at the moment because it's only in the first year of our collaboration. In fact, the digital team isn't actually transferring into the collaboration until the 1st of August. So we're going to take those digital maturity assessments, do them as quickly as we possibly can within the new collaborative arrangements. It'll give us a new baseline of where we can apply our money, our investment, and our investment in training and skills. I hope that answers your question on that front.
Thank you, Sean. And Councillor Pavier, do come back on that.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Thanks, Sean, for that response. So you're saying that with the digital team transferring in the beginning of August, because I'm just looking at the target time that we put on this of March next year, and that's not a huge amount of time away in terms of the target. So you're saying we're doing this in a sort of a pan-Gwent way across the SRS footprint. Is there going to be a particular local authority leading on this, or are we just agreeing to the various templates for the assessments, and then it's for the various local authorities to do that in a sort of coordinated way?
For me, I believe that Monmouthshire should be doing the lead on the digital maturity assessments because we've done it before and we already have the methodology in place. The reason that I'm talking about doing it on a pan-Gwent basis is because we are merging and amalgamating the digital and data teams. If we're all singing from the same hymn sheet, if we're all working from the same template, and if we actually get that template in place in our business planning processes across all of the local authorities, then it's an integral part of service redesign and development. So for us, we haven't previously had the digital maturity assessments as part of our performance planning. We intend to do that in the future, and if we can get that done automatically via e-forms, for instance, so that service areas can do their own self-assessment, and then we can again do a data exercise on amalgamating all that information so that we can focus on the right things from the right data that's coming out of those assessments. So yes, it's my intention for Monmouthshire to lead on the digital maturity assessments, and that's key to an awful lot of the information, the data and the digital forward thinking.
Thank you very much, Sean. And if Councillor Pavier is fine, we'll move on to... Oh, sorry, apology. Richard would like to come in.
Yeah, thank you for that, Chair, and thank you for the question. And just to build really on what Sean has helpfully described around the assessment, just to give Councillor Pavier and the committee a bit of assurance around our digital and data maturity. The assessments are a tool which hopefully helps service areas and help us as a collective target where we prioritise our effort to improve that maturity, as Sian has described. But just to stress that there's a lot of activity ongoing all the time in service areas to improve their digital and data maturity. It doesn't wait for an assessment. It's happening. It's identified in the report, and it's identified through the practice and processes that services are implementing. Nonetheless, the assessment tool itself itself will hopefully be helpful for services to rethink and reassess where they are and give themselves a plan for the future, as well as assessing where we prioritise resources as part of the collaboration as well. So I just want to stress that digital data maturity is an ongoing task. It will forever be an ongoing task to an extent, because perfection in this space is never going to be achieved. It's always a strive to get better each time within the resources available to us. But that's sort of some of the context. Just want to explain that it's an ongoing endeavour.
Thank you. Peter Davis would like to come in on that as well.
Thank you, Chair. So I guess it's just a broad comment, and I will bring in, I think there was a specific point, Councillor Pavia, which is relating to procurement and digital, and maybe I'll pass across when I just sort of conclude my broad point, pass over to Gemma Ellis, who's the procurement lead for Ardell, who's with us here today. So I think the broad point here is one of, I don't want the discussion here around digital maturity assessments as sort of somewhat back to Richard's point, to be somewhat of a distraction in terms of the pace at which we need to move. I think you'll probably well understand, given the context of earlier conversations, the MTFP and obviously the challenges in front of us. We do need to inject levels of pace. So it's not a case of having to do an end-to-end level of digital and data maturity assessments before determining as to where we're going to look to move and focus our efforts. That work is ongoing, certainly in the data space. I know through Matt Gatehouse, through Rich, and being involved directly into conversations with Matt Lewis from the SRS. There is an investment case, a self-financed investment case in the short term that's being put forward by the SRS to the SRS Strategic Board in the coming weeks. And now there is work advanced behind that so that they are on a rolling start to make progress on that agenda, just to provide some levels of confidence. Coupled with that, dialogue already ongoing. It's been taken through SLT, it's going through DMTs at the minute, so that we can determine and ascertain as to where, which area, because again, in the throes of Rome not being built in a day, we've got to be very targeted and understanding what are the areas that are most ripe to secure most value benefit. And that applies, those comments apply not just with data, but they equally carry across into digital. So, I've put a bit of a lean back in to Matt Lewis, just to make sure that we're really clear. I think, Sian, we had a conversation last Friday, didn't we, about this very point. We need to be really clear. Certainly in terms of the local authorities that are that are as part of this collaboration. Just to be clear, that is Torvine, Monmouthshire and Blaen y Gwent. Newport at this time are furrowing their own path alongside the collaboration, but still as part of the SRS. And we need to make sure that our priorities are firmly set and that we've got the capacity and resource deployed, not just through the SRS, but on client side and with service areas as well, to make sure that we are delivering at speed. Because you're absolutely right, it is the holy grail in terms of productivity for the sector. Digital and data offers huge opportunity, and we need to make sure that we grasp that with both hands and drive it forward, but in a structured and prioritised way. If okay, Chair, maybe over to Gemma.
Thank you. Gemma Ellis, yes, please do elucidate.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Gemma Ellis, I'm the Head of Commissioning and Procurement at Ardell. So just to pick up the procurement-related digital query, e-procurement tools and systems are a huge priority at the moment across public sector across Wales and England. The introduction of the new Procurement Act has put a lot more emphasis on the transparency requirements within procurement, which means we need to be issuing a lot more notices. Now in Wales, our digital platform for doing so is Sell to Wales, and it's fair to say we've had some teething problems through Sell to Wales as an e-sender into what's called the central digital platform, and this has happening across Wales and England. So we're working really closely with Welsh Government and local authorities across Wales to come together to see how we can overcome the issues we're experiencing on Sal to Wales, and we really are getting somewhere now. So that's the first tool that we need to use, Sal to Wales. And then across Ardal, we're using Proactis as our e-tendering, sourcing and contract management system, which provides a really robust audit trail from the very outset of the tendering process, right the way through to contract award and contract management. And what we've also introduced as well is utilising Microsoft Forms for our scoping and governance documents for pre-tender reports and contract award reports, so that provides a better visibility across procurement activity. It's still not perfect, and we would love an all-encompassing technology and procurement system, which we are talking about all the time and investigating what other local authorities are doing. So it really is high priority to improve our digital journey, really.
Thank you very much. And a very extremely important aspect of the Council. So thank you for going into it in such depth. It's been very helpful. And now, Councillor Strong.
Thank you, Chair. Looking more generally here at the self-evaluation process, and therefore I think a question for Richard and Hannah probably. If I'm correct, I think it's this the third year in which we've gone through this process, or thereabouts, yeah. And perhaps first time round it wasn't especially sophisticated. We're finding our own way, a bit more sophisticated last year and more sophisticated still this year, and we've seen some examples from behind me of how that is the case. Question is, where do we go from here? In previous years we've talked about benchmarking and perhaps comparisons with other local authorities. Is that something that we're looking at pursuing, or have we looked at that and decided it's not really, well, I won't say worth the effort, but it would be very difficult to do because of the different ways of measuring, the different nature of different local authorities, and so on. And are there other ways in which you feel that maybe next year, the year after, the process will be more sophisticated still? And where do you feel we are on that journey of self-evaluation? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Councillor Strong. So, it's helpful to draw the links as you do between this enabling self-assessment report and the full self-assessment report in the next item. So my answer may overlap the two, but hopefully that's okay. So I think this is the first year for this report, focus on the enabling report in front of us. This is the first year we've had all the enabling strategies in place for at least 1 year, and the first year we've completed, therefore, a self-assessment in detail about the aims and objectives of those strategies. That does very much align to our whole authority self-assessment report, which is the next item, where we focus on the arrangements that are in place for those, and the two exercises have definitely dovetailed together, and colleagues who lead each area have contributed to both. In terms of the exercise, the first year we've taken the enablers. Hopefully this gives the committee an understanding of our performance and the effectiveness of those arrangements in the first year, recognising that they are some of them are 3-4 year strategies, so it's about the point we are at now, and then we're hoping to see further implementation progress and impact over the subsequent years. So the refinement of this report will hopefully allow us to get greater clarity on those outcomes and impact as we move forward. In terms of benchmarking, it's a really good point because that transcends across both reports. In the self-assessment report later, you'll see we've included more benchmark information around some of our service area based performance and outcomes we can benchmark against where there's data available. We haven't included directly within this enablers report any benchmarking information, but I know through some of the mechanisms that are available we will be able to benchmark some of the information, but I think your point is exactly right. That's where there is value and meaning to do so. So this is the first year of this report where we focus largely on our performance, bearing in mind we set up the strategies and implementation for the first year. As we move forward, we can certainly consider where we can bring in benchmarking information. If we draw, for example, what we're just talking about in terms of digital data maturity assessments. Primarily they're about understanding where we are and our services are, but one of the products could be, if we do those on the collaborative basis, such as Shah mentioned, is we could be able to look at where others are compared to us. Now that's much more in the space of how can we work together to improve than saying anyone is better or worse than someone else. It's more in that constructive space of understanding and learning and then applying learning across. But we could look to include some more of that information within this report. But I think the key for me is the point you made about where that is relevant. But hopefully in the self-assessment report we'll come on to, you'll see where we started to include more benchmarking already. As you said, we're at the third year of that report. We're at the first year, if you like, of this report, but they come together.
Thank you very much, Richard, and thank you for your question, Councillor Strong. I'd just like to sort of bring up, as there doesn't seem to be any more other hands, and sort of a concise answer to this, because time marches on, but bearing in mind that the current increasing emissions and construction-related impacts, what specific new funding sources, policy levers or partnerships is the Council pursuing to remain on track for the 2030 net zero ambition? Big subject, but who would like to pick that up, please?
I think that one will be over to me. That is a huge subject and something we're probably not going to unpick completely here. What we're actually doing at the moment and what we have been doing is building that baseline of evidence to support us in levering in external grant funding to assist us in those transition goals. So we've undertaken costed surveys to actually decarbonise our built environment. We're just going through those reports at the moment. That will enable us to take forward schemes that are self-financing through our refit agenda, and that's where we believe that the energy savings that we can accrue from the actual implementation of interventions will actually fund the cost of borrowing to enable us to move forward with those. There are other areas which are much more difficult, for instance, actually decarbonising heat, because you will not generate the savings that you will require to fund that. So we will be looking at developing business cases to lever in grant funding and working with Welsh Government Energy Service to try and maximise our opportunities in that direction. The same with fleet. We're looking at a fleet transition plan. We also work with Welsh Government Energy Service and with the region around the implementation of electric vehicle charging infrastructure, both in our operational depots but also public charging. We're actually transitioning our fleet. We're 17% of our fleet has now been transitioned, but with both buildings and fleet, the first thing that we actually need to do is reduce it down to our core fleet. So actually looking at utilisation data to make sure that we're sharing vehicles rather than having individual ones in service areas. Also trying to get rid of the just in case when our vehicles are in being serviced, and then actually looking at what is the best solution for transition our services to be able to accommodate the vehicles that will be available from now on in the future. It's also working with our colleagues in Ardal around socially responsible procurement and embedding, reducing the carbon footprint of our supply chain.
Thank you. Just it's very interesting and, as you say, huge subject, but thank you for giving us an insight into what's happening in the Council. Thank you. Actually, Gemma from Ardal would like to add to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say a little bit more about what the work we are doing to look at our Scope 3 emissions through the supply chain. Again, huge area with huge challenges. We've actually appointed a senior strategy officer full-time to purely drive our carbon reduction agenda across our supply chain. So the key focus at the moment is trying to get better data from our supply chain. At the moment, we're only reporting on Tier 1 data, which means it's based on spend multiplied by the proxy figure within the category. What we need to be moving towards is actual primary tier 2 data from our supply chain. So we're working really closely at the moment with RAP Cymru, and also as part of a pilot with Welsh Government to really look at a standard reporting tool which all of our suppliers can feed into, because the key thing we need to be doing across the Welsh public sector is not going off in different directions. We really need to be supporting our suppliers, particularly our SMEs, to be able to start capturing their carbon emissions data and understanding where they are on their carbon maturity. So again, we've been undertaking surveys with our suppliers to see where they're at, what support they need, and we're also working really closely with Business Wales because they've got some really good free funding available to support our SMEs. So a lot's going on, for the future.
Thank you. Yes, it seems eminently sensible that things are standardised, and that when you have small to medium-sized businesses you're working with, that they have help to transition to this. So thank you. And now, Councillor Bond, do you want to come in again?
I have further question, if that's okay, Chair.
Yes, that's fine.
So it's around. Yeah, thank you. It was around really interesting, all this talk about information about IT tools and improvements. Fantastic. I wonder if that extends to internal tools. I know you've talked about procurement, but internal tools, for example, My Mama Share. So My Mama Share, where you raise an issue or a case, and it's very much a work allocation tool, a tracking and completion tool. And it's communication feedback to the residents, and it tracks closure, and also obviously it's resident facing, and therefore it's really important people really find it useful when it is used well. So are we going to be looking at that tool and making sure either improving the tool so it's easier for people to use because it's not used as widely possibly? Could we do a review, see if it's used as optimally as it could be, because obviously it's there to enhance efficiency and effectiveness, but the disappointment that people feel with the feedback and updating of the system, I don't know whether it's discipline or whether it's the system itself, makes people less likely to engage in the Let's Talk Monmouthshire or any other strategy or any other idea that Monmouthshire might have, because we don't get people don't get feedback through the My Monmouthshire very easily. I hope that makes sense. So are we looking at internal tools as well, or is it just the overarching tools for every local authority? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bond, and Sean Hayward is going to pick up on that. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that. My Monmouthshire has been in existence for a little while now. It does have some of its limitations in the way that it reports back to people. A lot of the report back depends on the actual input from the service areas concerned. So if there's a service request that comes in, then it goes back to the service area, then they put responses and replies on My Monmouthshire. So we are aware of the fact that sometimes those replies and responses are not as prompt as the user would like them to be. But it does do the job that it is there to do. We will be reviewing everything that's going on in my council services, particularly in view of the collaboration going forward now with our One Wales SRS partners, because most of our neighbouring authorities use my council services. We are combining the management team for that particular system. They're called systems administrators. So our systems administrator in Monmouthshire will be combining with Blaenau Gwent and Torfaen, and we will be reviewing the way that system operates and the way that our service departments actually use it. So that review is starting as we speak. And I hope that will reassure you that we'll get things going on that one. The other system you mentioned, I believe, was the one that
Let's Talk Monmouthshire. Is there an uptake? What's the uptake of my
I'm not an expert on Let's Talk Monmouthshire, so I wouldn't be able to comment on that particular one.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Chair. So just quick comment. So first off, I think we just need to also recognise there is, I think, some behavioural change that we need to deal with consistently across the organisation. So when I think those points about feedback loops, I think Sian's absolutely right to highlight some of the system limitations, but that doesn't inevitably prevent, I guess, officers looking to update the system and to ensure that, I guess, there is that natural feedback loop to the person who's raised an issue or a concern. I'm aware of recent dialogue discussions with various members, either directly or secondhand in the last couple of weeks. So I know it is of an issue that needs looking at. And I think similarly and separately, I think with ward members, plural, and in terms of queries and questions that are coming through, and making sure that there is a sort of a consistency of approach and mechanism to respond to those as well, through MCS or otherwise. So I'll just leave that there. I'm just acknowledging, I think, the recognition that we just need to do some targeted work around that. In terms of Let's Talk Monmouthshire, I think I know Paul Sullivan can't be with us today; he's on leave. But certainly through him and some dedicated resource that we've got behind it, alongside and embedded within the comms team, we continue to evolve and develop that platform. It has got a lot of potential, and I think we just need to recognise, Councillor Bond, that it is very much in its infancy at the minute. And I think there is a case of being bold and ambitious on the one hand, but making sure that we're taking careful steps, recognising that this is not the be-all and end-all. It does not decry from actual face-to-face getting out there sort of engagement on the ground. It is something that is the case, and I know Sian will know this as well. Digital is there not to replace, it is there to supplement and enhance how we go about our business, and that equally applies in terms of our comms and engagement work as well. If there's a desire for a fuller update, I'm sure that Paul would be happy to sort of provide that update in writing when he's back from leave.
Thank you. Councillor Bond,
I'll just say thank you very much, Peter. And of course, there's a number of people in our environment who haven't got the capability or the interest in using the digital processes. Thank you.
I'd just like to note how useful it will be to have a consistent approach with officers, so much appreciate that work that's going on, and I'm sure other members will as well. So with that, I'd like to move this report and thank the officers, and thank you, Councillor Callard, for presenting it, and we go on to our next item, which is the self-assessment. Okay. And yes, and Richard will be introducing this, as we were expecting the council leader to be here, but unfortunately she's been held up. So if you could, Richard, thank you.
It's okay, Chair. I'll hand over to Hannah, who's led the report, to give an introduction.
Thank you, Chair. Afternoon, everyone. So I'll just give you a very brief overview of the report. Conscious of time, I'll try to be fairly quick. So just to give you some context, an annual report that we bring to you is a requirement of the Local Government and Elections Wales Act. It assesses performance as part of the 24-25 financial year and seeks to assess how well we're doing, how do we know, and then what and how we can do better. So the role of the committee is to use the report as a tool in fulfilling their role of scrutinising the council's performance, and the committee can also use the report to identify areas that they'd like to scrutinise in further depth. So we hope to involve the committee in the development of the draft report ahead of the final draft being presented to Governance and Audit Committee as per legislation. So just to give you a brief overview of the structure of the report, we assess the performance under the objectives set in the community and corporate plan, and then we also assess how well we've used our resources under the 7 main enabling functions, and you will have had more detail as part of the enabling strategies review as well. And then we also assess how can we do better as part of the action plan beneath that. So as mentioned, this is an annual report that we bring to you, and naturally we will develop that report annually, and a lot of this is as a result of feedback from this committee and other committees, so thank you for that. If I just pick out maybe some specific changes that we've made as a result of that feedback, we've tried to increase the focus on impact and outcomes, so this is both as part of our assessment and our use of evidence as well. So as you will know, we've revised our measurement framework to increase the focus on outcomes, and we've also included those RAG trends and targets and developed our performance measures section as well to include those Wales comparisons. Similarly, we've included a section on benchmarking, so this will provide you with some benchmarking data against our nearest neighbours, which are other local authorities in Wales. These may not be geographical nearest neighbours, but are those local authorities with which we share a range of similar characteristics based on ONS analysis. We've also tried to be more concise and provide a more targeted and focused assessment, and we've also tried to assess where progress has been made and where it hasn't as well, and provide further explanation of progress and challenges. So if I just set out next steps very briefly, we have brought the report to you today. Governance and Audit Committee will then assess the final draft as per legislation ahead of Council decision. So we've assessed performance on a scale of 1 to 6, as we do annually, 1 being unsatisfactory, 6 being excellent. Conscious of time, I won't go through every assessment, but just to pick out, the objective scores have remained unchanged from last year's report. And then if I perhaps just pick out on the enabling functions, 2 scores have increased since last year. So workforce plan has increased from 3 to 4, and then asset has increased from 4 to 5. But the rest remain unchanged from last year, similarly to the objectives. So appreciate it's quite a big report. Hopefully that gives you a very quick overview. And unless Richard has anything to add, we'd be happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Hannah. That's very helpful. So has anyone got any questions to ask on this report? Thank you. Councillor Bond, if you'd like to ask your questions.
I try to stand back and let other people, but the people seem reluctant until the first person's put their hand up. Thank you. Okay. So I've got a few specific issues around, if someone could answer, please, about items in it, particularly around young people and the people more deprived areas, possibly. So about free school meals, it's we're still on page 10 or 20, whichever on the report. What barriers have you found already? I know you've been investigating what barriers there are. Are we missing some of those in need? Do the meals get produced anyway, or do we wait for the number of people who register or sign up for it so there's no wastage? That's a question. Around childcare, Flying Start, the numbers have increased. That's the same page. Have they increased in Caldecott, one of the 3 most deprived areas in Monmouthshire? Wonder if it's increased there. The meal kits, how do we get them? How do we help people get them? And then the only other one was about, sorry, that first area, permanent exclusions. So it's all about children and young people. Permanent exclusions, that the increase has gone up from 2010 to 22, I understand. Why the increase? Where do they go? And how's the social and emotional learning in schools progressing? Shall I answer those? Or the second one is around that's an area of young children, young people, which those are indicators. And second area is around impact of change and learning organisation. So that's page 66 or 56, depending on which one you're looking at. So where's the measure of the processes and project management and change review? and the delivery of projects or any changes. How many reviews have taken place with users as to see whether the project was fit for purpose? Where's the impact on residents assessed? And really, where's the learning? Where's the project management measures? How many are completed? Yes, and how does that impact on the users? Thank you. Where's that? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bond. So who's coming in? Is that Richard? Are you coming in on those?
Yeah, thank you for the questions, Councillor Bond. There's quite a few there. I've tried to make a note of them as I go, conscious they're quite specific. So, it's important we give you accurate information. For some of them we may need to follow up on.
That's entirely reasonable, Richard.
If that's okay. But I don't know first of all, I think you raised a question around uptake of universal free school meals, particularly in more deprived areas. I don't know if any colleagues in the room have got any update on that, or is that, again, if that's something we'll need to take away? Mm-hmm. We'll take that, yeah. So we'll take that away with written response. Similarly... Actually,
I think that Craig O'Connor would like to come in on that.
There we go.
Yeah, I can help out with that. Craig O'Connor, Interim Chief Officer for Place. I've been looking after catering for the last 9 months or so. The uptake is about 72% at the moment, and the colleagues are certainly working to try and improve that. I'm doing a lot of schemes over the summer in terms of trying to work with parents and to ensure that the uptake is higher. In terms of meals served, in the last year it was about 41,952, so significant amount there in terms of how we are trying to deliver. But ultimately, we've been trying to work with sustainable food colleagues to try and ensure the food education scheme as well. So working with schools to try and provide education around home growing, organic growing, and really trying to get children to engage with that, with universal free school meals. So uptake is strong compared to other authorities. So we're in a good place, but certainly a lot more work to be done in terms of trying to encourage people to engage in school catering.
Chair, so it was in. Sorry.
Councillor Bond, just before I bring you back in, I'd like to say I was speaking at the King Henry opening, and I was talking to the catering company who've been involved in formulating the food, and apparently the pupils are delighted with the offering, and it's been a huge success, and they're really enjoying what's being done there. So well done there. And Councillor Bond, could you just do your final question? It got a bit lost in translation, so if you could just repeat that.
Okay, so the first question was around the barriers. So the great work's been done. It was about the barriers of the free school meals, because you've done some work to try and identify. So I wonder what those were. About the Flying Start, about the meal kits and permanent exclusions. Those were the ones around children, young people. And the other one was around measuring our performance, delivering projects and delivering change, and reviewing that change and making sure that it's fit for purpose. Where do we measure that, please? That was the second one. So the first one's around young people. So there's 4 examples, 4 specifics in that. And the second one was around being a learning organisation, doing reviews and tracking our performance in projects and delivery of change. Thank you.
Richard, carry on.
Okay, so I'm conscious in terms of the one focused particularly around children and people, we don't have the director, Will McLean, here today, and I think some of the questions around particular updates, Flying Start, in Caldy Cart meal kits, permanent exclusions, which I know is an area the committee has covered in detail in the past few months with a specific report from those responsible. So it's okay, Chair, on those. Probably makes sense that we take those away and provide any written update to Councillor Bond. In terms of the final question around a wider point about sort of project management change, measurement of the difference of change. Now, in terms of the report, we cover probably very relevant really in terms of our self-assessment process, because in essence that's what we're trying to ask ourselves, is what impact have we made through delivering of our priorities. I think there's multi-layers to that within the organisation. Now I can certainly talk to it from our performance management framework point of view, and the work services do to plan and manage their performance. I said, the whole intention of our self-assessment is to challenge ourselves, to reflect on what we've achieved, have we achieved what we expect to, and what difference that's made to residents. Our service areas have got service business plans in place. We've got 50 plus plans in the organisation. Those as services set out what projects, programmes, actions they're taking forward in the next 3 years. They require them to use performance measures and updates to track progress, and annually to complete a self-assessment to review has the intended progress been made and has the outcomes of that been achieved, and if they haven't, to identify it and learn for the future and to plan actions accordingly. A summary of those outcomes where they relate back to the community and corporate planning objectives is contained in the report in front of you, and it's those plans that very much form the basis of the evidence in which we use to update those, along with the workshops, as Hannah described earlier, we undertake with service areas. So that's how it works in terms of our performance framework. Obviously we have then specific strategies in place, some of which, such as our neighbouring strategies, we touched upon in the report about how we monitor performance, how we give account for that, and also within those, whether there's specific projects we're undertaking, whether it's a procurement project, whether it's a building project, an asset management project, others will be able to give account of arrangements in place within those. So it is multi-layered, it is built in. I think one of the areas, Councillor Bond, we've consistently been conscious of in our self-assessment arrangements is making sure that we are being truly evaluative, we are challenging ourselves, and we are using all the evidence available to us to inform our judgments. I think this is, as we discussed in here, we've developed our approach, we've developed our report, and services developed their arrangements and maturity in doing that. Nonetheless, we know that there's always room for improvement, and as one of our continuing priorities as a performance team, the work Hannah and I do is to both support and facilitate services to make sure they're considering that, but also we act as a bit of challenge as well, and colleagues in the room may attest to some of this, hopefully in a constructive way, to make sure we're giving account of performance in as robust way as we can. So it's always an area for development, and something we need to consider, particularly as we bring in new projects, initiatives, as you mentioned, but hopefully that gives you a flavour of some of the multi-layered arrangements we have in place to support that.
Thank you, Richard, and thank you, Councillor Bond. And Councillor Pavier, would you like to ask your questions, please?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Can I thank Hannah and Richard for bringing the report forward? Whilst obviously this committee and the work of governance and audit as well is really important in terms of scrutinising the report and our methodology and approach, etc. I think in terms of public confidence and for the public to have confidence in the process, that our self-evaluation process is right and is robust. I think it's also important there's an element of external scrutiny as well, and in the future that might form part of Audit Wales work programme. Obviously we don't have the levers to facilitate that piece of work. That would be for Audit Wales to decide. But I know I've said previously at meetings where we've discussed the self-assessment annual report on previous occasions, I think there would be real merit in us exploring the opportunity of working with the Future Generations Commissioner in his office to see if we are, if our approach is the right approach, that we are measuring the right things, we are collecting the right data on the right things, and I suppose I'm putting that offer out there again, because not just the cabinet and senior officers would be interested, but I'm sure there'd be a number of councillors who would like to engage with this. but can we consider, again, reaching out to the Future Generations Commissioner Office and working with them to develop it may be a day's workshop to have a look at our processes? Because, as we touched on in the last item, we talked about digital maturity and looking at that engagement pan Wales, and I totally agree with Sian Hayward that we should lead that piece of work. And again, on this self-assessment work, in terms of being an exemplar authority, it could be really something that we could lead on and demonstrate right across Wales that we are robustly challenging ourselves in all areas, and the general public should have confidence in that. So I've just wondered if officers would be willing to respond to that suggestion. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Richard.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Councillor Pavia. I think, firstly, probably worth highlighting some of the arrangements we have in place that cover those already, and then certainly pick up your point around how we strengthen those, working collaboratively as well with partners. So, firstly, in terms of the work of audit and regulators, we have tried to factor within the report the findings of audit inspections that have been undertaken in the organisation during the year. For example, we've referenced some of the work CIW has done in terms of adult social care. We've also included a whole section on some of the work of Audit Wales and Estin as well in the year. So their judgments where they've undertaken that work has been important in giving us some independent assurance of our findings. Also, just to make you aware, if you're not already, Audit Wales have also completed a review of our performance management arrangements. In the last year, we reported that report through to Governance and Audit Committee. Pleasingly, they identified overall, we've got arrangements in place to manage our performance, and that we've identified areas we need to improve and develop those. One of the areas, for example, they've identified for improvement for us is how we give more detailed account of our underperformance or performance isn't going as planned. As Hannah mentioned, reduction, that's been a focus of this report, to try and bring in that further information. And in terms of our arrangements that will be happening, the other piece, so the self-assessment is guided in the Local Elections Wales Act, as well as producing an annual self-assessment report. It also requires us to undertake a panel performance assessment once in every electoral cycle. That's where we will select, working with partners, particularly WRJ, a panel of peers to come in and scrutinise and challenge us around set questions. We are in the process of setting that up and establishing those questions with the aim of undertaking that in February this year as currently planned. So when we get to next year's self-assessment report, we will have the evidence from that panel as a further peer evaluation to inform our findings and obviously report back to you in terms of the outcomes of that. And obviously there will be a process to actually provide you with the findings of the Council's response to that peer report in itself. So hopefully that gives you a flavour of already some of the arrangements we have in place and how we use some of those independent judgments that are in place. In terms of working with others and colleagues, and particularly the Future Generations Commissioner's Office, absolutely, we're open to that. The report in front of you dovetails with the requirements under the Future Generations Act to give annual account of our wellbeing objectives, which for us are the objectives set within the Community and Corporate Plan. I know we're very mindful of adopting the 5 ways of working and how we consider assessing our performance under that. And we do have regular contact with the Commissioner's Office. But again, I think that's something we can certainly look to build on. We're very aware at the moment that the Commissioner has just produced their Future Generations report, for which we'll be looking to respond as a council to that. And certainly within that response, we can look at how we develop further work with them on our self-assessment report, particularly on our wellbeing objectives, which I say is the focus of the legislation. And finally, just in terms of working with others, Hannah, myself, Matthew as well as Head of Service, we're part of WLGA networks around performance, around risk, around policy development as well, and we share and work with other colleagues in areas where we need to or where it's appropriate around our performance management arrangements as well. I'm part of a group looking at how we develop some of our performance management data to get greater focus on outcomes in what we do, and that's really beneficial to me to be able to learn from and share ideas with other colleagues, and obviously adopt those from Monmouthshire, but equally hopefully share what we do should others find it of interest. So if that gives you a picture, there's a range of elements of partnership and collaboration work we have in place, but certainly we take on board the point you raised around the Commissioner and any further we can do with Future Generations Commissioner.
Thank you, Richard. And Councillor Pavier, would you like to come back on that?
Yeah, just very briefly, Chair, and just to clarify, Richard, in terms of the performance management scrutiny work that Audit Wales undertook, did they take into account our self-assessment reports as part of that? Within that scope of work, they analysed our reporting in that as well.
Yeah, they looked at self-assessment as part of our performance management arrangements, so they considered that as part of their work. And obviously, you can share the report. We took the report through the Governance Audit Committee time, but happy to share the report with you as well and the committee to give you some background of their findings as well. I say one of the main ones is about how we make sure we give equal account for explaining any areas of underperformance, which has been a focus of this year's process.
Thank you. And we've actually now been joined by Councillor Mary-Anne Brocklesby, Leader of the Council. Would you like to make any comment? I know that you wanted to speak beforehand, but would you like to speak now?
Thank you very much, Chair, and apologies to the committee that I was not able to join at the beginning of this item. I was tied up in another meeting that overran. It's a bit difficult to join in when there's obviously been quite detailed discussion on the self-assessment report. I'll keep my comments brief. It'll have been made clear, I'm sure, by the team that the self-assessment is part of our statutory requirements, but it's actually more than that. It does give us a moment to reflect overall on top of the scrutiny that goes on specific policies and also delivery plans and also our performance overall throughout the year. It gives us that overview against the community and corporate plan of taking a pause to look at what has gone on previously since 2022, or rather since April 2023, when this our community and corporate plan was agreed by council, to see the progress made and to think about where adjustments can be made, and where we can see we're doing well, the improvements that we can build on or changes that we can make to accelerate that improvement. That's it, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brocklesby. And with that, I'd like to move the report and note really, Richard and Hannah, what an awful lot of work's gone into this, and also how much it has moved on in the years you've been doing it. So it's very impressive. So thank you very much indeed. And our next item is just to note the Council and Cabinet work plan, if anyone has any comments on that. Councillor Pavier.
Sorry, Chair, I may have slightly jumped the gun. If you're gonna, you may be moving to our forward work programme. So I'll wait for you to move on, and Councillor Bond may want to come in on this item.
Councillor Bond, do come in.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Just to say that it was raised at last meeting, and I think Hazel was going away to talk to whoever's relevant about some way of indicating which of these these items have been concluded and which have been delayed or are still live, so that and also, if you remember, work on adding some sort of impact column or some sort of more information, because as you see, there isn't that much information explaining what each of these documents are, to help us make decisions about whether we would like to bring them to scrutiny. So we've still got a way to go, please. Thank you.
Yeah, if I may, Councillor Bond. Yeah, just to reassure you that we did take that point immediately forward, based off. Was it when was it? Last week, whenever it was. So we suggested that be rolled into the overall changes that are being done for the planner, which is a much larger piece of work. And obviously, as you say, the purpose column has been added, but hopefully that will be populated more and more as things progress. The explanation that was given as to why it currently has the setup it does is just in order for there being able to be a greater sort of look across everything in terms of what's been before and what's been done and what's still to come. But as you point out, that can still be confusing to look at. So that's the explanation as to why it is the way it is. But we have put forward your suggestion for making those changes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bond. And now this may well be where you come in, Councillor Pavier, the performance and overview scrutiny work programme and action list. So do a comment. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And I suppose it's a delicate item because just the scale of the reports that came before us today, really chunky reports, and there was probably some elements we had to curtail in terms of questioning. I would imagine there'd be potentially some councillors may have been overwhelmed by some of the information that's presented us this morning, and the opportunity to try and scrutinise all that in what will be coming up to 3 hours. We need improvement in terms of those key reports that come to us that need a huge amount of detailed scrutiny. So I don't know whether that needs to be picked up by the chairs group, and working with Cabinet and SLT to look at how those reports come forward. There's a number of elements on our forward work programme, particularly at the bottom, that have been on there since 2022, and we haven't managed to get to them and look at them. Whilst we provide a really important scrutiny function, we also don't want to be fodder for officers passing reports for us to look at potentially unnecessarily. We may have to push back on some things in terms of those reports coming to us, so we can actually tackle the things that we've identified that we need to look at. So it's just a point, Chair. If that can be obviously relayed to the Councillor Neil and officers as well, because this needs to be picked up by the chairs group. I think I felt it was a little bit unfair the size of the reports coming to us today. Two would have given probably two of those reports would have given us more opportunity to go in depth on some of those things. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Pavier. I have to say I completely agree with you. There are many questions that I've left unsaid, and I'm sure other councillors have as well, because we have had a huge amount to go through, and our function is to scrutinise, as you say. It's a very important one, so we need to do it properly. I know that Robert wants to come in on this, Councillor Pavier. Oh, right. But actually, we'll let Councillor Bond, if you could say what you need to say, and then Robert can come in afterwards.
Thank you very much. And something I've raised is I agree with Councillor Pavier there. Also, there's something that I know that Hazel and others have been trying to organise, which is the grants item. So particularly around SPF and how the decisions that were made last year that was raised from the call-in. And also what learning we can get to make sure it doesn't happen this year. Now, the concern is that they're trying hard to get this organised, but we're going to be in that time again soon, because I think it was end November, December. So soon after we come back from the break, then we'll be needing to review that to make sure we get the learning, so that we don't have perhaps the issues or the yeah, that we might have had this. Well, we did have this year. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Thanks, Councillor Bond. Thanks, Chair. Yes, just to reiterate that we are on the case with trying to organise that, Councillor Bond, but you've made some good points there, so we'll feed those back as well. Coming back to what Councillor Pavia and the Chair have said, just to assure you that we are aware of things being especially busy in the last few weeks in particular. There's an element of necessity with that, I think, trying to get things sorted before the summer recess. But we have already, Hazel and I, have already been discussing about how we might need to make some changes, which we're going to discuss with the Chair in due course, very much alluding to what you've said there, Councillor Pavia. I think one option would be that we perhaps try to limit the number of items per meeting henceforth. The problem with that is that concomitantly then we would probably have to have a lot more meetings unless we approach things a little bit more severely in terms of what comes forward, as you were saying, Councillor Pavia. But it's quite hard to strike a balance because there's so much important work that needs to come before the committee, and then so many areas of interest that the members have, which we always try to encourage the members bringing items to look at. So it's a difficult balance to strike. My immediate thought is simply we might need to have more regular meetings, but we haven't actually discussed that with the Chair yet, so I don't want to jump the gun too much and he's not here. But just to let you know that these things are very much in the forefront of our minds, and we are going to address them as quickly and as sensibly as we can. Oh, while I've got the microphone, actually, in terms of the forward work programme, could I just make sure everyone's aware that we've added a special, speaking about adding extra meetings, we added a special, make sure I give you the right date, on the 3rd of December. So that's to cover the planning annual performance report, potholes and road conditions, and the community and corporate plan progress update. And then we're also looking at a date in January for the Schools Health Research Network data item, which came up out of a recent meeting, which I think, Councillor Bond, you said you proposed looking in more detail at. So that's going to come in January, as well as a school exclusions update, very much pertains to what we were just talking about, and then possibly the WESP update as well. So the different dates in January being discussed. That hasn't landed yet, but certainly the December one is fixed. But once they're both confirmed for definite, then you'll get the standard confirmation email. So I think that was all I needed to say. I would also just to point out with the action list that since the agenda was published, a number of the items from the 3rd of June have been, those items of further info being sought have been sent out to you, just in case there's any confusion there, but it was overlapped slightly with when the agenda was published. And I think that was it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Robert. And now I'd like to move on to confirm the minutes of our 2 June meetings on the 3rd of June and the 10th of June. I'm treating them together, but if anyone has anything they wish to flag up or change or consider not put in that should have been, please speak now or forever hold your peace. I think we're fine, Robert, on that. I'd just like to say thank you so much for all the officers for your hard work and taking our grillings. And it's been a sort of heavy meeting, full of important detail. But thank you very much indeed, and wish everyone a very good summer. And see you in September. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.